Hey guys, what's up? My name is Zach, and today we're going to be analyzing the Texas 2018 Senate race. So as most of you know, Ted Cruz is the Republican incumbent in this seat. He tried to run for the Democratic nomination during the 2016 election, but lost to President Donald Trump. He's been in this position for one term, I believe. Beto O'Rourke is the U.S. representative from the El Paso area of Texas, and he's running against Ted Cruz for the Senate seat. So this race has been described by many different polls as likely or sometimes leaning, and this is mostly because of Texas's shifting demographic, but it's also because of Beto O'Rourke's unique campaign style. Usually when officials are running for statewide campaigns in Texas, they don't usually go to each county. They usually just go to the big urban centers, especially Democrats. They go to places like Dallas, San Antonio, Houston, places where they know turnout will occur on their side. But Beto O'Rourke, he's been visiting each county, or at least has been trying to. I don't know if he's accomplished it, but he's been visiting each county in Texas, and I don't know if that'll work very well for him, but I know it'll shape how candidates campaign in the state either way. But let's go look at the polling. As we can see, Ted Cruz has a definitive advantage over Beto O'Rourke when it comes to polling, leading consistently, typically above 5 points in most polls. And one major disadvantage for Beto O'Rourke, I think, is his lack of Hispanic appeal. I think that if you're a Democrat campaigning in a statewide race in Texas, you have got to have Hispanic appeal. I've said that multiple times in my presidential predictions. But Beto O'Rourke is not Hispanic. Ted Cruz is, so that's one big disadvantage that he has against him, and that's gonna be shown even more once I get to more of the details in this analysis. So let's go look at Ted Cruz approval, or his net approval. So Ted Cruz approval is at 49%. And his disapproval is at 34%. Most people characterize Ted Cruz as being a very unpopular senator, which he may be throughout the United States, but in Texas, he still has a pretty good approval rating, higher than his counterpart in Texas, John Cornyn, as we can see by these numbers with approval and disapproval. So that's one big advantage that Ted Cruz has going into the Senate race. Also, name recognition must be accounted for. Ted Cruz definitely has some of the best name recognition of any senator in the United States, I have to say. So now let's look at Trump's net approval in this state. His approval, although it might have been low, as we can see in April and March, it is now higher than it's been in a very long time, with a plus 10 net approval, which is very good for Trump in this state. This is Trump's net approval, not Cruz's net approval, which I just covered before. But this is going to be a big advantage for Ted Cruz. Although Ted Cruz has never been the biggest supporter of Donald Trump, this regardless is good news for any Republican unless they are staunch opposition towards Donald Trump, which I don't think Ted Cruz is, at least not currently. So let's look at the polls shown in the Wikipedia page for the 2018 Senate election. So as you can see in these polls, not those. Well, I guess I should cover primary turnout to begin with. So as we can see, the turnout for the Republicans was 1.5 million approximately for the Republican side, compared to the Democrats, 1 million, which is 500,000 less than the Republicans. That may be a lower number, but regardless, I believe that is up from where it was in the last Senate election in this state. That is pretty good for Democrats regardless. However, still an advantage for Republicans, I have to say. One thing that is pretty important is if we're looking at this Democratic primary map, we can see that red, as you can see, represents Sima Hernandez. I believe that's how you pronounce her first name. But she is the Hispanic challenger, or she was the Hispanic challenger to Beto O'Rourke for the Democratic nomination. She didn't really have very good experience. She was a baseball coach, I think. But regardless, she is Hispanic and Beto is not. And we can see down in the south part of Texas, mostly red. We can see that this part is mostly red, and this is the part of Texas that Democrats need in order to win. This is the part that's almost always blue, and if you have good turnout here, you have a pretty good fighting chance at winning. And Beto O'Rourke in the primary did not have good turnout here because he wasn't Hispanic, and this part is predominantly Hispanic. He did, however, have good turnout in these districts around Midwestern Texas, in Houston as well, Dallas. But this is the part that Democrats need. So that's one big disadvantage for Beto O'Rourke if you're analyzing the Texas Senate race. Now if we're looking down at endorsements, Ted Cruz, as we can see, has a long list of endorsements, including from Donald Trump and Mike Pence, which will help him in a state that has a plus 10 net approval of Donald Trump, as I said before. However, Beto O'Rourke has a very long list of endorsements, including numerous U.S. senators, numerous big-name U.S. representatives like Joe Kennedy and Kyrsten Sinema, Kamala Harris, Chuck Schumer, Maggie Hassan, Elizabeth Warren. And then once you're going down here to individuals, his list of endorsements from individuals goes from Stephen King, the author, to Sarah Jessica Parker, to Paul Rudd. It's a very long list, so he definitely does have a lot of endorsements and support. And then if we're looking at the polling on the Wikipedia page, as we can see here, it's pretty much the same compared to the RCP polling. Ted Cruz has a pretty definitive advantage, typically over 5%. And then if we're looking at fundraising for the candidates, and we might as well look at the polling as well for Ballotpedia, with Ted Cruz leading consistently in all of them, which reflects pretty well on the Wikipedia page and on RCP. So here are the campaign contributions. Beto O'Rourke has consistently led against Ted Cruz very well, getting more payments or receipts in his towards his campaign, more disbursements. He doesn't have more cash on hand, but regardless, he still has thus far raised more money than Ted Cruz has. So that's a very big advantage in his part. But as we can see here, there are a number of different things that Ted Cruz can and is continuing to use against Beto O'Rourke, including his position on abolishing ICE, which Ted Cruz has attacked him for being extremist. And I don't believe this was a smart position for Beto O'Rourke to take, especially in a state like Texas. I think that Ted Cruz is right to attack him for it. I mean, I'm not going to state my opinion on the matter in general. I just think that if you're campaigning as a Democrat in Texas, it's probably not a smart decision to say that you're not for ICE and that you would abolish ICE. I understand the context that it was coming from, but still, it was not a smart statement for Beto O'Rourke to make, as we can see by this description here. And another statement made by Beto O'Rourke that was not smart on his part was his support of impeaching Donald Trump, which Ted Cruz has as well attacked him for, and I don't think will work well in a state that's plus 10 net approval for Donald Trump. I understand the context that this was coming from. Beto O'Rourke was saying that he would vote for impeachment if the vote ever occurred as a U.S. representative, but still, just making that statement so blunt and blatantly is not a smart move to make when you're running for senator of Texas. And then if we're looking at this is the same Wikipedia page, my apologies. But if we're looking at the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton did lose this state, obviously, but she lost it by margin of 9%, which was better than... Oh, now I remember why I have this open. The 2012 election in this state, which will hopefully open. There we go. This was the last election between Ted Cruz and Paul Sadler. Ted Cruz was not the incumbent when he ran for this position, but he still won by a margin of 16%. But keep in mind, this was in 2012, and if we're looking at the map here, it really isn't all that different from the map shown in 2016, but Hillary Clinton lost this state by 9%, whereas Paul Sadler lost this state by 16%. So, as we can see in the past decade or so, certain areas have developed, have had a higher population, and are now more democratic than they probably have been in 2012, and it's mostly just as a result of the strong Hispanic turnout that we've been seeing rise in past elections in Texas, in this area, which I have talked about before. But overall, if we're going by Beto O'Rourke's chances at winning in Texas, if we're considering his statements that he's made regarding impeachment of Trump and regarding ICE, that's one big ethical disadvantage on his part. If we're looking at, however, funding, he has gotten better funding than Ted Cruz. He probably has better support when it comes to endorsements than Ted Cruz does. But Ted Cruz does have a decent approval in Texas, and Texas is still in Trump's column overall. And with those things taken into consideration, and Beto O'Rourke's lack of Hispanic appeal, I would call this state likely in Ted Cruz's column. I believe the Democrats made a mistake. Well, I didn't think that Democrats made a mistake. I think that Julian Castro specifically, I think that Julian Castro is someone who should have ran for this seat. I believe that, he's someone who should have ran the past elections as well. He's just turned down every single opportunity to run for a Senate seat. I guarantee that if Julian Castro was the nominee rather than Beto O'Rourke, he would have beaten Ted Cruz. He would have beaten Ted Cruz, and he would have had a good platform to run on if he wanted to run for president in 2020, which I think he does. And why he doesn't want to seek a Senate seat, I have no idea, but for that reason, I believe that this state would go, well, not just for that reason, but overall, for all the reasons I stated before, I believe the state would go likely in Ted Cruz's column. I just don't think it's time for it to go to the Democrats, at least in a statewide election, not for another election cycle or two, I'd say. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I know I'm posting less frequently, and that's because I've just been busy in general. School's coming back. I have to go back to school in 3 or 4 weeks, so at that point I'll probably be posting less and less. I'll try to post as much as possible, but still, hope you guys enjoy the video. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.